So for the 32nd lesson of class, we're going to look at the philosophy of rational egoism and compare it to altruism. So the obvious question, what are the differences between the two? Now, rational egoism is the theory that oneself is or should be the motivation and the goal of one's own action, whereas altruism means acting in the best interest of others rather than in one's own self-interest. Some people believe altruism constitutes the essence of morality and ethics. And when I unveil these ideas to people, I've seen in the past that people gravitate to a very black and white thinking where rational egoists are, they're mean, they're self-serving, they don't care about anybody, they don't care about anything, whereas altruists are good and wonderful and caring. Okay, please keep an open mind and don't get into the equivocation that rational egoism equals bad and altruism equals good. Philosophically speaking, they both make compelling arguments. So please keep an open mind until the end of class when you know more. So I'm going to bookend these ideas between two philosophers, Ayn Rand and Auguste Comte. Sorry for my lousy French accent. I've never taken French. So Ayn Rand clearly writes her philosophy through the lens of rational egoism. There is no doubt about it. She makes no qualms about it. In fact, she kind of basks in it, where Comte, quite the opposite. He preaches altruism as the most ethical way to do business. So here's a couple of quotes, okay, that demonstrate Ayn Rand and her rational egoist leanings. So the meme on the left, she defined freedom as to ask nothing, to expect nothing, to depend on nothing. Now the second meme, the mind is an attribute of the individual. There is no such thing as a collective brain. And the third meme, no one's happiness but my own is in my power to achieve or to destroy. So clearly, just from these three short quotes, Ayn Rand feels existence, ethics is based upon boosting yourself up as an individual. And before people get too angry at her, hypothetically speaking, if everyone in the world took care of themselves, they took care of their own belongings, of their own income, of their own what have you, the world would operate very nicely. So that's Ayn Rand's leanings. And if you compare her to Comte, Comte's, I think it's his most famous quote, said, "The only real life is the collective life of the race. Individual life has no existence except as an abstraction." And his second quote, "The sacred formula of positivism, love as a principle, the order as a foundation, and progress as a goal." So these two people are very extreme on this debate between rational egoism and altruism. But instead of reading their philosophy, I'm going to ask you to turn inwards. Okay? Now, taking this test, okay, that you can click here, it will give you a number between 1 and 100. And before class, I had you predict. I think we know each other pretty well by now. Who is the most altruistic? Who is the least altruistic? And predict yourself on a scale of 1 to 100. And we wrote our names on the board, me included. There was my number. I scored a 78 out of 100. And some people, were quite high at 93, all the way down to 41. And every year I do this, it usually has this sort of range. And it's another example of the bell curve. And for you fans of statistics, a lot of life fits into this bell curve. Most people are in between. And if you looked at our class, even the 41s and even the 93s, or lowest I ever had was a 28, and I've had some hundreds, but the majority of people are somewhere in the 50 to 70 range. You would expect this. Now, if you go to the extremes, if you had, for instance, a 0, okay, that's going to be problematic. You have no thinking, or no regard for other people. That would put you in the realm of, psychopaths and whatnot, or sociopaths. Whereas extreme selflessness, these zealous altruists, where they, deprive themselves of the basics to give to others, and almost this ascetic where you just give up everything and sacrifice everything. Now, again, that's why the majority of people are somewhere in the middle of the bell curve to say, hey, there's a time and a place, or there's somewhere in between. So how can you apply these philosophies? And this was a great discussion. I loved listening to you. So number one is employment. Now, I asked you all what you planned to do for work. Now, certain occupations, you better have a high altruism rating. Social workers, nurses, healers, people in these fields really have to do for others. Now, some people said, I want to be in the skilled trades, or I want to work on computers, or be in a lab by myself. The altruism piece isn't as important. So my question to you is, does your level of altruism match well the occupation if you're choosing? Now, number two, charities and nonprofits. Why give to charity? How much should I give to charity? What is the role of nonprofits in our society? Should religious institutions have to pay taxes to go to help others? Or should it be on a volunteer basis like it is now? That sort of thing. Government policies. So when you enact a government policy, are you making policies that are too altruistic and enable the people too much where they don't progress and they don't grow? Or are they so egoist side, for example, the laissez-faire policies of the 1920s where people are hungry and that sort of thing? How do you enact policy? What's the most ethical policy that incorporates the best attributes of rational egoism and the best attributes of altruism? What do the outliers signify? So is it problematic if you have an extreme number? So for instance, if you had a 25 out of 100 for rational egoism, is it problematic? What if you had 100 for altruism? Is it ethical at that point? If you are 100 or in the 90s for altruism, will you be taken advantage of by others? Why is it your prerogative to help others? Why can't they help themselves? But on the other side, if you only are focused on yourself, how do you account for people who are needy or are handicapped or people in need or the collective? We don't exist as islands unto ourselves. How do you fit into the collective if you don't have a regard for the collective? These sorts of questions. And then we looked at which philosophy is more conducive in certain scenarios. Occupation. And we looked at my occupation, a teacher. Is it good to be altruistic? How much altruism should be brought to the table? Your occupation. How much altruism is required in your occupation? Sports team. So if you're part of a sports team, should you focus more on yourself or focus more on the team? And this is a tricky situation. Sticky wickets, as they say in the British Isles. So for instance, I'm a basketball player and I want to score the most points as possible. I want to lead the league in points and I want to shoot. Let's assume a lot of them go in. Well, the team benefits from my rational egoism. If I'm a wrestler, I don't give a hoot if all of my teammates lose all of their matches. I'm focusing on me. I'm going to work really hard to win my matches. Lo and behold, I win a ton of matches. I've helped the team in the process. It's a tough balance to strike. Friend groups. Do you want a friend that's more of a rational egoist or one that's more of an altruist? What makes better friends? What type of friends do you look for? What type of friend are you? And then parenthood. Now, if you are completely altruistic with your children, are you just enabling them and kind of delaying adulthood? Now, if you're kicking them out at 13 saying life is tough, you're on your own, I'm focusing on myself, I don't need you, I have my own deal, is that a little harsh? What balance do you strike between this rational ego point of view and this altruistic point of view? So to wrap up class, I'm going to ask you to write, which of these two philosophies are the most ethical? Which of the two do you consider yourself more to be? Can you think of situations where one philosophy is more appropriate than the other? So essentially, take everything we've learned today from that self-test, from our discussions, from reading Rand and reading Comte. So how do you weigh in on this? And again, this balance, this this bookending of rational egoism and altruism, you will see time and time again in individuals and institutions in all sorts of scenarios. So hopefully you have a good understanding, and I look forward to reading what you wrote, and I appreciate all of your insights and discussions today. So thank you for watching.